Hi, everybody. My name is Tim Wojtek. I'm Director of Technologies for the First Nations Education Council based in Wendake, Quebec. We support 22 First Nations communities with broadband services, serving over 350 service points in communities since 2005. We've been part of the FMCC since its inception, and I'm here to describe what FMCC is all about, give an update on what we're doing, and some of the strategies that we're working on to continue our work to improve policy at various levels. So I'm just going to describe quickly some of the people who are part of this consortium, and some of the representatives are here today. I'd like to invite more people who are part of it because we do have a wide variety and membership across Canada since the beginning. So maybe I'll get each person to present themselves and which organization, please. Brian.
Good morning. It's good to see every one of you here this morning. My name is Brian Nakaji. I work for Western James Bay Telecom. Kind of like our services, our network technologies morphed into something that I took on the role as the innovation, and in terms of its how technology has come a long way. And I have beside me a supervisor, boss, Dave, to introduce himself.
I don't like the term boss. I just coworker is what I like to go for. My name is Dave Cote. I'm general manager of Western James Bay Telecom Network. I come from a wide background. I'm actually a licensed auto mechanic, believe it or not, was my first foray into the workforce. When I found out that in the early 90s there was not a demand for auto mechanics, I actually flipped over to the IT side and then the telecom side. I actually spent nearly 20 years with Bell Canada through various parts of the company. Workforce management has actually been a very important part. I hold it very close to my heart. And at some point, Tim, I'd love to just address one item that came up with the youth. There was a question, and I was trying to think of an answer, how I could actually say something. So maybe before the panel exits, I'd like to just say a few words.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Thanks.
Bill Murdoch. I'm the Executive Director with Clear Sky Connections and the Acting Executive Director with the ICI. I've been involved with the FMCC since 2017 for quite a while. So our mandate in Manitoba is to build a fiber network to connect the First Nation communities in Manitoba for connectivity. And we're not an internet service provider. Thank you.
It's hard when you're my age to keep things short. I am Sally Braun. I have worked as a workforce development person with the Attawapiskat First Nation Education Authority. I lived in Attawapiskat and Moose Factory for approximately 20 years. I was the project manager that brought cellular connectivity to the community of Attawapiskat. I worked for 10 years as the general manager of Western James Bay Telecom Network. And now I am assisting FMCC with consultations with regards to policy to CRTC and ISED.
My name is Trisha Toso. I'm with ECN. And I've been working with FMCC since 2021, just providing admin support. Just one thing on my background, I actually come from a literature background. I did my BA and MA in literature. And the one thing that it does teach you is how to read really well. So that comes really good, handy in for policy. So that's what I'm doing now, is working in policy.
Thank you, everybody. My background, I went to college here in Algonquin. I'm a land surveyor by trade, and I fell into computers back in 1990s, and that's how I became involved in networking. So as long as you go to school, here's a message to youth, it opens doors. That's the bottom line. So if you're going to do a math course or whatever, who knows where it takes you, but the important thing is going to school, and just stay in it as long as you can. So, a bit of who we are. The project was developed in 2012, 2013, which grew out of a research project. And I remember that research we were doing in the early years, where we started doing research on distance learning, how important connectivity was to deliver that service to First Nations. And this stemmed out of Northern Ontario, KNET. You might have heard of KNET in the circles, in the connectivity circles for many years. But they had a great leader, Brian Beaton, that I must mention his name because he was a mentor to me, who was key in driving this and continues to exist today because it's still needed. And what came out of this is the First Mile, which documents now more than 50 First Nations initiatives across Canada, which takes the First Mile approach, meaning put the First Mile first than anything else, putting the focus on the community. Enabling community infrastructure and service delivery and ownership. We're going to riddle our presentation on ownership because it's so key to enabling all of the things that could happen with it, whether it's training, services, management. You know how hard it is to implement a door lock system in a First Nation community when you have one sector doing that thing and one sector doing the other thing. Imagine everybody working together using the same system on the same network with the same network policy, security, permissions that you need. So that kind of level of, how would you say, strategy, or at least operational strategy, if we could put it that way, is needed. But we're not there yet because the high turnaround in communities, I must say, is a challenge. You have people going in, Director General going in for 2 years and leaving. We're starting over again. Who's doing the support? What's your strategy? They come in with different strategies. So we're steady working on promoting what we see as the best way to manage infrastructure. So we're each doing our part across Canada to get into the circles of program manager, whatever I don't know how you say this, but let's say, for example, at First Nations Infrastructure Program in Ottawa, the FMCC were able to present connectivity on what First Nations are doing to the people who work in the department, so that this could go up to the senior manager or policy people and saying, hey, we got some good examples here. This is a good success story. So we should be working with that to change policy, to change program. So this is what we do, and we continue to do it. We encourage everybody to do it. Take the First Mile, research, documentation, consult with these experts, because these experts are available to you. We promote ourselves as being available to you, and take it and advance your own, how would you say, mission in terms of how do you bring technology support to a community. So we just want to let you know that we're available to share this. And not only that, but encourage your community to join the FMCC, because we want your input to change policy in a good way. I'm not going to repeat so much here, but I'll just continue. Yeah, the last point's important because we have developed a record now with CRTC, which I think is helping us to not only promote what best practices we share with them, but getting them to engage with us. And that's excellent. If you could have, them engaging in us and vice versa, this really opens up the channel now. You're really talking policy sharing, policy development. However, we need to respect the policy or the procedure that CRTC does, and we're doing it in a good way. We got to always remember we do it constructively in a good way. So, FMCC is a collective voice that respects each member's right to speak. We aim to facilitate spaces where communities gain substantial voice in the formation of telecommunication policy and regulation. This is our theory of change. I'm not going to go into detail, but at the end of it, we promote ownership of technology at the local level. There is, of course, regional support aspects that are integrated in various forms. For Quebec, I don't know how many regional organizations exist. Like you have the presentation from Peter's group previously for the Nescapi network. We have the EU network, and then you have the FNEC network to the south. But it doesn't mean we don't collaborate with each other. Like I was collaborating with the Cree 10 years ago to get their expertise to help us with our connectivity needs. And guess what? We now have a regional network with partnerships existing between the EU and the Atikamekw Nation to the south. So it's really, I totally, suggest that you collaborate and you exchange with experts not only in your regions, but across Canada to see what they're doing. And I think this is the key to advancing what communities are missing in terms of expertise. Don't forget your brothers in other nations who are doing the same thing and have gone through similar challenges, what you're going through. So just remember, there is existing networks such as this that could help you. This is just a quick analysis between what connectivity is and what services, between what a person sees from the city, if you look at it that way. We often recommend that people who make policy come to our regions and get the experience firsthand. There's nothing more better than to see what's really on the ground. So we still promote that as well. Some of the things that we observe is, I'll get the board to speak soon on the next slide, but what we've done recently was to have FMCC being recognized as an expert group with the Assembly of First Nations. And the reason for that was we understand the Ottawa lobby domain. There's several lobbyists in Ottawa. I don't want to call them competitors, but it's the reality, right? There's companies knocking on the door saying we have a solution for everybody, that type of thing. So what we say is, wait a minute, before you decide on any policy or get into a partnership, check with us first, because we have 30 years of experience doing this thing. And we're willing to give free advice and consultation to whatever technology question you have, even on spectrum. And this is what we've been doing. And the resolution, the most recent one, was in 2024. And that's the one that gave us the recognition by AFN as an expert body. So this is where our link now with AFN exists. And we're hoping to build on that over the next year or so in terms of developing a strategic way forward to advance our needs. I don't know if someone from the group would like to talk about some of the recent developments there, but maybe if I could go out to, I don't want to call on Trish because she's been busy this morning already. Maybe, I don't know, Bill, do you want to chime in on the AFN, the future of FMCC and AFN in terms of developing a partnership or some kind of transparent process? If you could.
Sure. The big part is a coordination of effort, and just simply having those conversations and being open to having the conversation. And it's a lot of the struggle that I've experienced in Manitoba is just with groups not willing to have a simple conversation to explore options and try to coordinate what's best for First Nation communities around connectivity issues. So I know AFN's going through effort to try and put some costing around what it's going to take to upgrade the infrastructure. So we're trying to have those conversations because we have a lot of experience with this group. And we've done the boots on the ground, like we've been in community to experience what the benefits are once the connectivity is there. So just having those conversations and I mean, it's a slow, long-going process, and you have to build the trust with the people that you're working with. So by going through that process, it creates the relationships, it builds the trust, and just being open-minded.
Thanks, Bill. The next slide here talks to one of the big major milestones, I guess, for the committee was the basic service objective hearing in 2016 at CRTC, where the CRTC were listening to groups like FMCC and other to promote the broadband as a basic service, not the standard telephone line during the time. So we were able to bring. I'll come back to this one in a minute, but this is the team that went to the FMCC hearing, and we have Dr. Heather Hudson on the left, Dr. Rob McMahon, who many of you see through the literature, who's based out in Vancouver. You have Penny Carpenter from KNET, you have myself, and you have Marco Ashish from Abijawan, who at the time was only served with satellite, and it was only a francophone speaker. But I felt it was important to bring him because of all people in our region who needed connectivity was this guy. So the judges, it was a very interesting experience, and I would love to see a youth person in this panel the next time we go there. That would be so awesome. And this is something maybe, I try to commit to the FMCC maybe in the future is to have a youth person there the next time we go. This would be so powerful, So this is what we need. We need representation here so that your voice is heard. And this is where I think we need to go in the future, is to bring everybody together and work strategically to bring the people that we need to make change in policy. I'm going to try to go back. Some of the recent work that was done by the FMCC in terms of policy modification was our recommendation to the connectivity program. I forget the name of the program exactly, but is it called? It's not the UBF, right? It's the other one, Broadband Fund. It's called the Broadband Fund. Is the process closed now? Is it still open? It's still open, eh? Okay, just checking. Some of the changes that the CRTC agreed to was the addition to training dollars. So connectivity projects now could add training budgets to their needs. The other thing that we were able to change was the funding. It's difficult for First Nations to put the money up front. So now the fund offers a 50% advance in the project. And I believe the third one was the open access. So when First Nations do broadband connectivity, they don't need to open access to the telco or to whoever, because it does not respect the sovereign rights of the First Nations. So this doesn't apply to First Nation broadband projects. So these are the three main changes. Is there anything else that I'm missing here, guys, in terms of the recent changes? It's good? Okay, thanks. So the bottom line is every time there's an intervention or a CRTC proceeding happening, we're there to see if there's any impact on First Nation in terms of connectivity and do our best to provide recommendation. I must say, though, there's a lot of other things going on CRTC that we're not part of, like the radio spectrum, the radio discussions around that. But each organization has a role, right? Like the James Bay people have people there, but the FMCC is not representing radio broadcasting whatsoever. But we are all linked in a way. Our chief, our regional chief in Quebec is at a hearing this week, I believe. They're having hearings on on the radio, or the content, I believe, the Aboriginal content. So we're all linked somehow. Yeah, these are some of the older activities. Okay. I just want to show you something that happened in our region, and this happens everywhere. But there was a fire in the community of Kitsisakik about 2 years ago. And it just happened that this building was the band office. And the band office is where we put our POP, our fiber center. So we had no fiber. Our community didn't have any connectivity. But since we owned the fiber, we were able to restore the fiber the next day and put in a Starlink to continue service with internet. So the whole community was restored in 24 hours. Instead of waiting 3 weeks from the local incumbent to come in and do the engineering and all this stuff. So this is the power of ownership. You can't get any more direct than this. When you own it, you control it, you support it, you maintain it. And this is the whole issue of ownership here. I don't know, I can't speak to fiber to the home ownership, but I'm assuming it's the same type of benefit. But maybe I could get you guys who are experts in FTTH to maybe talk about ownership and why it's important.
I can speak to the importance of having local ownership in an emergency situation. 2 or 3 years ago, the church in Attawapskat burned to the ground. It was a mental health issue. A gentleman went in and decided he wanted to burn the church down. It's a devastating loss to the community. We lost all communication. The fiber line was burned, not all of it, but the piece that went in front of the church. All the services were down. Bell telephone services were down. I believe the wireless services were down as well because they were connected to our fiber. So everything was down. And I had the band manager calling me, asking me, how soon can we get the internet up and running? And I'm thinking to myself, it's not like I've got like a neurosurgeon on standby to fly up to anywhere at the drop of a hat. I mean, you have to assemble the team. The logistics behind a situation like that are crucial. You're trying to keep everybody calm. You're peeling people off the ceiling, but because they have no connectivity. If there's an emergency, you have to send your kid by foot down to the ambulance station to get an ambulance. There's no telephone service. There's nothing. So we were able to get that up and running, I think, in about 48 hours. And I'll let Dave speak to that part of it because did you go up there?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, I was up there. Yeah, so at that time, the fire was so intense that there was no trace of the church left. There was no trace of the pole line in front of the church. Everything was literally gone. And the neat thing about working up there is when we talk about ownership, we had one employee at the time who we flew from Kashashawan up to Attawapskat, and he was there to be the boots on the ground. But we had at that point about a dozen young people that came out, and they knew that it was a community-owned network. And they were all willing to pitch in somehow, whether it was driving a truck, climbing a pole. And it's actually funny because that summer prior, being a former Bell Canada field supervisor, I was one of the few old guys that knew how to spur poles. And I had 2 of the young guys there that actually had their spurs with them, and they were eager. They were practicing on poles behind me, showing me, yep, I don't need the truck. I can just spur the poles. But it was an incredible outpouring of support. And what was also interesting was at the time, Bell Canada had a local person in the community who did repairs locally. And everybody pitched in helping everybody. So, having ownership of community-owned infrastructure is very important. And I'll speak to that maybe just after at the end, Tim. Like I said, I did want to touch on workforce development and my past with it and where I see it currently, but I won't get into that right now. We'll continue on.
Okay, we're almost done the presentation. Thanks, Dave. Here's just another example of what's involved in our work, and I realize there's other people doing the same kind of work in terms of cabling, but this is a new school in the community of Manawan, and I wouldn't know how to pronounce the name, but I did learn it once, but I can't now. But that just give you a stat on what's involved in enabling internet in the classroom with wireless technology and whatnot. But the cabling alone is extensive. But when you do cabling, you got to make sure that you cover all the aspects, whether it's door lock, security camera, because these are things now that's reality, right? You're in a school, you want things to be efficient. You don't want to be bumbling keys for this school of this size. So it's about optimization and planning. So when there's a new school in Quebec where I am, the school is encouraged to call us in technology so we could work with the engineer to do the planning for the cabling, to make sure that we account for the number of cables in the classroom, where the security cameras are going to go, which doors do you need automated, that kind of thing. So we're part of it now. So we make sure that we're involved. And even to go further, our organization is involved in promoting what we're doing in different circles, like the Director General circle. That's another circle where it's important to be at, because if they're not aware of what we do, they're just going to, go ahead and do their own thing. So it's about these small steps, even though they don't seem big, but they're so crucial in terms of doing the work together, working together. And this is what everybody should be doing. And when I hear stories about people are not connected, I'm scratching my head and saying, what's going on? Like NWT, like you're right. Like it doesn't make sense. It's about equity, and how come you're not there yet? So I encourage you to reach out to our team, and we'll do whatever we could do to help you promote what's going on in your community. And this is the kind of activity that we could try to help advance in that sense. That's our website. It has been translated into French recently, but excuse the missing links. There's some missing links in it. But the FMCC is a bilingual organization. We did bring Francophone members in, and we promote ourselves as being open to, it's a national organization, and this is where we want to be, like the ICI. It's a national organization, and we're here to support ICI in terms of providing, whatever we can in terms of policy or expertise in connectivity. So I will leave my presentation there, and I'll go to each person for final comments. I know, Dave, you wanted to talk about the youth, and then we'll go to Brian. And okay.
So one thing that was touched on a bit earlier, concerns about developing workforce, finding the right people, finding educated people, training people. I spent 15 years in various leadership positions at Bell Canada, through Northern Telebec, throughout the North. And whenever we were looking for people, it was always we had to find people with experience, with university degrees, college degrees, trade certificates. And after a while as a leader, you get that hammered into your head that that's who you have to hire. And when I first came to Western James Bay Telecom as the assistant general manager at the time, I remember Sally and I used to have discussions about finding people and training people. And over the past, I will say, year, I've thrown it all out the window. I really have. I've thrown it all out the window. And I'll tell you how I found who I now consider my best technician that I have ever hired in the close to 30 years of IT and telecom leadership. This guy's a convicted felon 3 times over. He had a drug habit that he's fighting. And I was introduced to him by my board president, who I've become quite close to. We talk every day. He brought him to my office, and he took a chance on this guy, and he had him putting together desks or doing dump runs in the community. And I just saw the way this guy was looking at stuff in my office and asking questions about the internet and everything. And there was something in him that I could just see. And my board president agreed to actually let me take a bit of a time slice with him in his day. And we started using him. And I would give him projects that he would look and he would say, I can't do that. I don't know what I'm doing. And I would say, you can do it. There's no difference between figuring out that IKEA set of instructions and doing this. Call me if you have any questions. And he did. He figured it out. He put together an equipment rack. And not only that, he put together all of these structured cabling systems on the side. And he took pictures and showed me. And I said, I've never seen that done before. Bell techs love to rush things. You took time. You care. And slowly over time, fast forward about 7 months, this guy is known in his community as the guy. And I spoke with him, and I get a little emotional talking about this. I spoke with him about 2 weeks ago, and he said one thing: thanks for believing in me. That's all he ever wanted. And he said, that's why I always got into trouble. People thought I was the guy that got into trouble. Now, if the fiber goes down, he can splice. And I mean, I used to actually, as a senior leader, grade people's work. I have never seen splices the way this guy can do it. And we don't have the equipment that Bell does. He's everything. And now I want to take him and put him through a proper college program. And to the point of, am I going to lose him to somewhere else? I hope I do. I hope that he can serve as that beacon for other people that are in similar positions of him, that you can do it. It doesn't matter. So, I encourage all of the leaders here to look beyond that normal pool of people that you might be looking for, the high school graduates or whoever. Look beyond that. Look for the guy that maybe is sitting in the lineup at the courtroom. He might be the best person, or she might be the best person that you never knew you had on staff. Yeah, I just want to add that in just because I know it's been a concern here for the past 3 days.
Yeah, and Brian, that's a good point. I have a staff of 12, and the people who remain there for many years are the ones who are loyal and dedicated. So you're looking for people who are committed to their work. It doesn't have to be someone with a university degree. It just could be someone who's serious at their job and dedicated. And this is what it takes in the technical world, because there's going to be some peaks for sure. There's always stress peaks and what have you. So you need that person to be dedicated and, that type of person. So Brian?
Good afternoon. I wasn't sure if it was still morning or in the afternoon. And with respect to the developing First Mile, even before that and onwards to its what it's become for the technology in the area. For me, I started off managing our organization with finance. And I didn't really know much of what I do know now. I only did so when I decided to go back to school. And I did my research on the digital divide. And throughout my undergrad studies, I made it a point to learn broadband, the backbone, all throughout that process. And I was asked, more or less commissioned, to look into expanding our network. So what it did for me then was that as I was researching, I came across this textbook. It's called Information and Communications Technology for Development. In short, ICT4D was the book that I read. I read it from beginning to end, and I was able to develop my thesis from that, and to a point where I began to prepare a proposal to expand our network services. And I'm glad to say that we were approved for a multi-million-dollar proposal as a result of expanding our services. And it's still, I think we're still rolling out towards completion. And when it comes to enhancing that sort of or constellation, if you will, and the optical communications, the concept behind that was something that I had to learn pretty quick and pretty fast. So it's come to a point where I would read about case studies that were included in that the textbook. And I'm happy to say that I was from really then with nothing to getting my undergrad to getting or receiving my graduate studies and specializing in public policy. Now I'm into transcending that in terms of how I see as a broadband as a basic right for any First Nation. And I heard over the course of the last few days that some First Nations are still confronted with trying to bring that technology, that information, rollout into their First Nations, and how it is a challenge for them. So, yes, and I thank Tim Whiteduck for saying that you can reach out to us in terms of trying to developing your network. That's not to say that we come to a point where we can rest easy now, but we're still confronted with challenges continually. Case in point, we outsourcing part of that technology to a third party, where they were based out in Quebec with a radio frequency technology to reach our customers. And with that base, we were then able to close that down with the improvements that we've enhanced with the fiber to the home network. And we're still trying to build up speed, I guess. We're getting into technology that's coming to the fore now. Like, say, for instance, one of it is being the cloud technology, which is still somewhat in a few areas in James Bay that we're still confronted with. That we're still, I'm still using Starlink to upload some big files, but we're not servicing Moose Factory per se, but we do have an alliance with them to try and bridge that somehow. So that's one challenge that I'm bring here today for you to when you think about these things. So anyhow, I'll just end there for now.
Thank you. Bill?
Some great stories. I don't know what I could do to complement it. I don't know. I was thinking of what Dave was saying. Years ago, I taught an IT course in one of the First Nation, in Sandy Bay First Nation. Back when dial-up internet was a thing, Windows 95, NT4, I'm dating myself. So it's the The goal of the program was to train local technicians to support local community. So one of the first things I did was I got a clipboard and I went to all the businesses, RCMP office, health center, school, band office, to see what the existing infrastructure was. Well, the power of the clipboard. I just walked into the RCMP office and I said, I'm here to evaluate your IT infrastructure. They said, okay, have at her. And they just let me walk around. I know, as power of the clipboard. So after I kind of figured out where the community was at IT-wise, I kind of built a path forward of what needs to be support and what anticipated upgrades would be needed. And that's how I structured the classroom. In the class, I had a complete mix. I had one girl that was fresh out of high school. I had another gentleman who had 2 years university. I had a grandmother. The first day of class, she was afraid to touch the computer because she didn't want to break it. I had another gentleman who was also a grandfather, but he only went as far as grade 7. And actually, he was the best student in the class. I mean, he was by far. He just understood, got it. He was able to visualize it, even though his formal education was grade 7. But he was top of the class, and it didn't matter what the IT situation was. And by the end of the course, the grandmother was able to take the computer apart, put it back together again. She was just, have at her, which was great. Which is kind of falls with my belief to help an individual in the community. So you help the individual helps the family, and then the family helps the community. So I always try to focus on the individual. I don't know who that is in each community, but in every community there'll be a rock star, and just trying to find that individual is the challenge.
Thank you. I think are we still good for time, Fred, or do we have to wrap up? Keep going? Okay. Okay. Or do we go for questions? How about if we open it up to questions? Good. Any questions? Oh, we got a few over here.
As one of the gray hair fellows in the audience, I thought I'd add my 6 cents worth. 1970, I was a young computer engineer, and I worked for digital equipment with PDP-8s, PDP-11s, things like that. I had 19 community colleges that were announced in 1968, and it was my mission to go to all of them and introduce computers. There wasn't an organization such as FMCC, but I wish there was. There were a lot of initial disciples, if you will. I remember Iroquois Falls Secondary School, or not secondary, yes, it was. The math teacher there, he had a wonderful foresight about it. He preached to me that as we had Arctic char and beaver at his house dinner, that he wanted to keep the students out of the woods and the mines for a few more years. I attended a math conference in Kapuskasing, not realizing when I drove from Timmins in winter that the old teletypewriter was made of pieces of metal that had grease that froze. So when I plugged it in to show Moonlander on the screen, that Moonlander wasn't going anywhere. I couldn't see it, actually. So the whole presentation for 2 days was, imagine this Moonlander here, and it's using fuel, and you have to have force against gravity. Some of you may remember that first computer game. Anyway, here we are 50 years later, and I'm still enjoying the aspects that we're finding here. You're doing a very important job in preaching and bringing these messages to the next generation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tanya Kellen with Brain Trainer, who spoke on the first day. And we're driving connectivity with colleges and universities and high schools to deliver WebXR connectivity. So I'm really interested in what you said and to work with you with our Indigenous groups that are already on board. We're designing virtual reality immersive simulation for intergenerational trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, bipolar, and teaching in high schools from 6 to 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, and then into college and university. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing. My question is, how do you see opening up broadband at a lower spectrum to be able to drive connectivity with the immersive experiences that are coming? And the immersive experiences, have you been researching them to train next generation upskilled workers in your remote populations?
Bill or spectrum expert on the lower frequency of use of lower frequency.
About I'm sorry, you're asking about bandwidth and access to like augmented reality and
Virtual reality.
Virtual reality.
There are some tests that we're running with the colleges and universities to develop technology where you don't need 5G. You can be on WebXR that reduces the file size of these heavy files quickly.
Yeah, file compression and encryption and privacy. I'm not familiar with WebXR about that, but I do know it's another. I'm just thinking way back when you had being able to use a mouse, like left click, right click, double click, or where just simply how to use it and using games as part of the education process. It's just another way to introduce technology to individuals that are maybe not technical, but being able to see what the technology can do to generate that interest and provide a potential career path for individuals. Like myself, when I started way back when, I was going to be an architect, but in the software program, AutoCAD has pull-down menus. And you could actually program the pull-down menus. So that got me into writing code. And I had more fun writing code than doing architecture. So then I started going down the programming path. Going down the programming path, and you have to get computers to talk to each other. So that got me interested in networking. So I literally, I took a course that was kind of a mile wide, inch deep, included programming and networking. After I completed that, I literally flipped a coin, networking or programming. So then I took a computer networking course. And after I completed that, I was offered a job in computer programming. So I got them to pay for my programming course. So they wanted me to build a contact management database way back when. That's before Salesforce and all those other applications. But creating games, augmented reality, it's I'm just trying to remember that game in Windows. It's like Landmine, where you click on the box, or Minesweeper or something. Yeah. That's just or Solitaire, drag and drop. It's to get people used to how to use a mouse and pointing devices. It's just another way to introduce IT and for individuals.
So my question is, if you're working with third parties sometimes to help you, we would like to give our technology to you to experiment with and to build on so that you can drive greater connectivity without having to have 5G.
That'd be great. For the remote and the really remote areas where connectivity is always a challenge, unless they have, of course, something like Starlink or something.
Yeah,
but it'd
exactly.
be dial-up.
other grants that we can look at. So thank you for sharing that.
But
And I'm
yeah, and
very
the-
interested in connecting. Thank you.
Having standalone independent systems that don't
Yeah.
require connectivity are only required for updates.
And just require WebXR, which is a much lower bandwidth so that you don't have to get to the 5G. We have a roadmap to do that.
Yeah, thank you.
I encourage you to reach out to one of our, one of the people here to find out if, potential in the regions for that kind of project. So thank you very much, everybody. I think our time is up. Thank you.